All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today, we are going to be covering the final Machinist subclass, which is the Grenadier. Yeah. That does mean a quick reminder, if you're enjoying this content, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All of those things are really, really important. As the reason that I harp on this every single time is it actually makes a massive difference on how many views the video gets, if people like it or not. It really does mean a big thing. So, that being said, another thing, because this is the end of the Machinist, I am officially running low on classes to cover in the version I have. Again, there's a newer version. It has both the Reaper and the Sage in there. I'm not going to deal with that until after I play Endwalker and actually get a feel for the classes themselves. But I have yet to do the Black Mage, the Samurai, or the White Mage. Those are the last three classes. So, in the comments down below, let me know which one of those three classes you want me to cover next. Okay, so, that being said, the theme that we've kind of seen with the Machinist subclasses has been what I just refer to as passivity. You know, they are passive subclasses. They don't really change much about how you play the class other than maybe adding a bonus action here or there with the Tinkerer. The Grenadier is the complete opposite. The Grenadier adds so much more to it, to the point where the first ability for it is actually going to give me probably the best example of complexity for complexity's sake that I found in 5th edition. And to explain just why it's something that you want to avoid. So, that being said, let's dive into the class itself. So, if you hadn't guessed, the Grenadier is going to focus on grenades, or effectively bombs. They call them bombs in this. I don't know why they wouldn't call them grenades, other than the fact that bomb just feels like a better word. Because grenade has a very modern feel to it, and despite the fact that this is a technically kind of steampunk modernized class, it just feels weird to say, yeah, I've got a grenade, because when people think grenade, they think, you know, World War I, World War II, up to modern times, and that's not the feel. So yeah, I completely understand why they would call them grenadier bombs. But at the same time, it just feels weird that it's called a Grenadier. Why wouldn't it go? Like it's a weird paradox. The both answers are both right and wrong at the same time. It's Schrodinger's subclass is what it is. They're both right and wrong at the same time until you did discuss it. So that being said, the Grenadier is going to focus on bombs, but the way that they do this is so weird. And doesn't really gel with the rest of the class. Again, one of the things that I always talk about with subclasses is basic 5th edition design, the refresher we always go through. Every class in 5th edition is designed to play very, very differently right from the beginning. In order to do that, every class has what we call defining features. These are either things unique to the class, or maybe not unique, but things that the class can do earlier or differently than any other class. And in order for something to be a defining feature, it has to show up in the first two levels. So the defining feature of the Machinist is the graze shots, effectively. And then the technologist inventions is what I could call them. And they're cool, interesting defining features. To be blunt, I actually like the inventions better than the graze shots. Not because there's anything wrong with the graze shots, but I've seen the graze shots in every other gunslinger class or subclass I've seen in 5th edition. And in most other systems. There's a gunslinger class in Pathfinder. And again, the gray shots or called shots or trick shots, whatever you want to call them, that's always something that is a part of any gun-based class in a tabletop RPG. That's just how it works. Even when you start getting to blasters and space stuff, you still have these trick shot mechanics. So it's not that they're bad mechanics, it's just that they're always there. But the inventions thing, that is something that's kind of unique to the Machinist and the history of the Machinist. When you look back to where the Machinist comes from, really, where a lot of the abilities take their names from is Edgar from Final Fantasy VI. Edgar is a relatively important character in the story. You meet him relatively early on, and he stays, I think, through the entire Giga game. You can use him at different points. Final Fantasy VI is a wild Giga game. If you've never played it, you need to, because it's one of the best. It's one of the best Final Fantasies ever, but it's definitely one of the best pre 3D Final Fantasies. The 2D Final Fantasies, it is one of the pinnacles. I have a hard time calling it the pinnacle because I still like Final Fantasy V better. But that's a personal opinion. Everyone else thinks 6 is the best. Anyway, a lot of the abilities come directly from Edgar. And Edgar was this really, really cool character who, for the most part, never really used their attack action once you got to a certain point in the game, because you had this thing called tools, where you would buy these tools, and then they were free. They didn't have limited uses or anything, and each one did something different. You had Bioblaster and Flamethrower and Noise Blaster, and they were all just better than any weapon you could ever give Edgar. And so he was a fun character to play because the different tools that you used would let him do different things, and it was just fun. He was a cool class. And so a lot of the tools inspired abilities in Final Fantasy XIV. The Machinist could be called Edgar 2.0. It very easily could. So that's one of the reasons why I like the technologist inventions kind of stuff for the Machinist more than the trick shots. And it's what I think the Grenadier should focus on instead of bombs. But let's actually dive into the class itself. So at 3rd level, you get Explosive Innovator. During a long rest, you're able to prepare and keep a number of bombs equal to your intelligence modifier. Only you may use these bombs. A bomb costs 1 silver in materials to create. As an action, you throw a bomb within 30 feet of you. All creatures within a 5-foot sphere make a dexterity saving throw against your tech save DC. The creature takes 1d8 fire damage on a failed save, has much on a success. This damage is increased by another d8 at 6th, 11th, and 17th levels. Additionally, we'll get to that next part in a sec. Let's talk about the bombs themselves. So, the Grenadier has a new action it can take. It can throw a bomb. Now, little pedantic word choice thing that I'm going to harp on here. A 5-foot sphere is a sphere that is 5 feet. So that means this only hits a 5-foot area. Just like a 5-foot cube would be a cube that takes up 5 feet of space. I think what they mean is a 5-foot radius sphere. And they actually make that specific mention of radius later on, though the way that they word it is confusing and poorly worded, but they actually do make that. So just anytime you're talking about spheres, you need to make sure you are referencing whether it is a radius or diameter, because in general, if you're just going to say a 5-foot sphere, they're going to go, okay, it's a sphere that measures 5 feet. Okay, and that's going to be the easiest way to measure spheres, to measure its diameter. That would be a 5-foot sphere. A sphere that can be contained in a 5-foot area. That's a 5-foot sphere. This, by the way, is not 5 feet. This would be closer to 5 feet. So if you mean it to mean actually a 10-foot sphere, which is a 5-foot radius sphere, because radius is half a diameter, just make sure you say radius. So that being out of the way, this gives the Grenadier a limited use area attack that the Machinist doesn't have. That I'm not opposed to. That's kind of cool. It's kind of interesting. However, the cost. And the reason I'm going to make a big deal about this is the perfect example of complexity for complexity's sake. And what I mean by that is, for these bombs, you have a limited number of uses per long rest. That is a thing that already exists in D&D. There's tons of abilities at a limited number of use per long rest. This is specifically tied to your intelligence modifier, another thing that already exists in D&D. So they're not creating any new systems or anything like this. I'm not a huge fan of tying things to ability modifiers anymore because, in general, we've already seen that what tying to an ability fighter. An ability modifier actually means is 4 or 5. It's all it ever means, but because any ability modifier you tie it to is going to be important to the class, and the class is going to max out that ability modifier instantly. So in general, it's only ever going to mean 4 or 5. And to have this entire thing where you have to look up your intelligence modifier and then use that to figure out how to just say 4 or 5, it's super, super easy and simple. And it stays that way for the majority of the game. By the time you're 8th level, you will have whatever ability that is, for the most part, is going to be maxed. So from 8th level to 20th, it is 5. It's always 5. From 4th level to 8th level, it is 4. And then from 1 to 4th level, it may be either 3 or 4, depending on how you rolled your stats. But that's it. That's all it ever is. That's all it's ever going to be. It is boring. So I have issues with that, but it does exist. However, the cost. The cost adds another thing you need to keep track of in relation to this ability. It in no way enhances the ability whatsoever. Making them cost something is not a benefit, it is a hindrance. However, 1 silver, which again at 3rd level, you probably have either 3 or 4 as your intelligence modifier. By 4th level, it will probably be 4 or 5. So let's use 4 to use a bigger number, because that will make it more significant and show why it's still pointless. So at 3rd level, you have 4. 4 silver per day is not that much. That's less than cost of living for some levels, some lifestyle levels. 4 silver is not something that's ever going to deter you from making bombs, especially by 3rd level. 1st level, 4 silver can actually be a kind of a big deal, but most classes, as part of your background, you will get a pack of coins worth 10 gold. And you only need to replace these bombs, because they don't wear out or anything. You just, as you use them, you replace them on a long rest. So that 10 gold will probably last you until... if you had to make these at 1st level, it would last you until 4th level. And by the time you get to tier 2, 4 or 5 silver a night doesn't affect you. You pay more for lodging for that night. So it doesn't benefit the ability at all. It's meant to be a limiting factor, but it doesn't limit anything. There is not a situation, unless you have been robbed somehow and you have no money, there is no reason to have a cost associated with this thing. The only thing it does, it adds one extra thing for you to track. It adds complexity just for complexity's sake. It doesn't limit it. If they were more expensive, it would be a little limiting factor. You know, if they were a gold instead of a silver to make, well, that's a big deal at 3rd level. Again, by the time you get to tier 2, 4 gold a night or 5 gold a night isn't really that much. Let's say they're a platinum piece. Then that is a really important thing, to the point where you wouldn't be able to use them at all. And that's where the issue with adding a new quote-unquote system, even though things costing things to make does technically exist, you've added a level of complexity that doesn't need to be there. It doesn't help anything. Everything this class can do doesn't matter about the money, the cost of the stuff. There's nothing in the class that mentions that the cost gets bigger or less throughout the whole thing. They even have the additional section we haven't gotten to yet that has special bombs that have no cost to them, which we'll talk about that in just a second. But literally, this is just there to add complexity for complexity's sake, and that makes the ability just worse. There's no reason to have a cost for this. The cost itself is not enough to actually be there. There's already a limiting factor on it, and you can only use a certain number per day. So there's no real reason to have the cost there. It's just complexity for complexity's sake. And again, this is a very, very common thing in other RPGs, and it goes against the very founding ideas of 5th edition. The entire purpose of 5th edition was to get rid of complexity for complexity's sake. That's what 3rd edition was built on. That's what 4th edition tried to change, and they just did it in a different way. 4th edition is as complex as 3rd edition's in certain aspects. And then in other aspects, it's significantly simpler. It's weird. 4th edition was a step in the right direction, let's put it that way. But it was still had a lot of needless complexity. And this is a perfect example of needless complexity. There's no reason to have a cost in here except to go, well, you also need to keep track of this. Well, why? What is that? Does that let me do something different with it? No. Does it make it harder to use? No. Does it make it affect abilities different? No. Is there something later on that makes how much they cost important? No. Well, can I sell the items? Is that why there's a cost? No, you're the only person in the world that can ever use them. Well, then what's the point of it? Well, because it's real. Realism. We're playing a game where people can conjure fireballs in their hands. Realism doesn't need to be a thing in D&D. Okay? So, that being said, again, I'm not particularly against the idea of the Grenadier. The issue I have with it is there's nothing about the Grenadier interacts in any way, shape, or form with the defining features of the class. Grenadier, you can't use any of your Graze shots with it because Graze shots requires the attack action, and this is a completely different action. So that takes out half of the base class. You have to choose between being a Grenadier or being a Machinist. Technically, Technologist, it uses the tech save DC, but most of the inventions you're not going to be able to use with this because emergency rescue takes an action, so does throwing a grenade. And the cloaking device doesn't actually say what kind of action it uses, but it seems like it should be an action. So really, Grenadier just adds new abilities that have nothing to do with the base class. Okay, fine. There are some subclasses that do fine with that and are okay because they kind of work in tandem with that. And this, again, it's a limited area attack. Okay, giving the Machinist a limited area attack is kind of interesting. I like that. Then we get to the additionally. Additionally, you may craft one specialty bomb during a long rest. These bombs act as though you cast that spell centered on a point where you threw the bomb. The effect of your specialty bombs is challenged using your tech save DC. You may only possess one type of each specialty bomb at a time. The bomb effect lasts the maximum amount of time the spell allows for concentration spells. You may build a specialty bomb to cast its spell at a higher level by temporarily giving up a bomb slot for each level you want to raise the casting level of the specialty bomb. The slots returned after the bomb is used. and then it lists the specialty bombs. We'll get to the specialty bombs in a second. Let's talk about this word soup of complexity for complexity's sake nonsense. Specialty bombs. I'm not opposed to the idea of having special bombs that can do something. The way that they've made this, let me explain in an actual game how this would work. At 3rd level, you have access to 2 different specialty bombs. One that lets you cast the sleep spell, one that lets you cast the thunderwave spell. Now, sleep is a remarkably useless ability that is useful sometimes. For the most part, nobody ever uses sleep because it is overly complex for the ability that it does. You roll a bunch of hit dice, and then you don't know how many hit points the enemies have. So you have to roll a bunch of dice and say, hey, I have 28 hit points. Can that affect anyone? And the DM just tells you it affects 1 or it affects none. Doesn't tell you how many hit points. You're not allowed to know how many hit points the enemy has. That's not information the player's ever able to have unless they're metagaming. And it only affects a number of creatures that you have more than their max hit points. So sleep, again, there are certain situations where it's massively, massively useful. It generally tends to be like 1st or 2nd level, dealing with a large group of very, very low challenge rating creatures, because you can get like half of them to fall asleep, kill the other half, and then go back and kill the ones that are asleep. Or you can get 2 or 3 of maybe a 7-person group asleep, and then sneak up and effectively crit kill the ones that are asleep because they're incapacitated. And if you go up and a melee attack made within, blah blah. So it is, once you get to 3rd level, when you get access to it, it's generally not useful anymore unless it's cast at higher levels, which you can't do with this subclass. Now, the other issue I have with this is you may build a specialty bomb to cast its spell at a higher level by temporarily giving up a bomb slot. What is a bomb slot? Bomb slot is not defined anywhere in the document. Bomb slot is used there and only there. The only time the words bomb slot show up in this entire document are the 2 times it is referenced in this one final paragraph. I have no idea what a bomb slot is. Does that mean your Grenadier bombs? You can sacrifice having a number of Grenadier bombs to have higher level specialty bombs. Does that mean your actual specialty bombs? Because again, at 3rd level, you can have 1 sleep bomb and you can have 1 thunderwave bomb. Does that mean you have 2 bomb slots? And if you sacrifice having a thunderwave bomb, you can have a level 2 sleep bomb? Does that mean at 6th level, you now have 4 bomb slots? I don't know, because it's not defined in there. And again, this adds another thing to keep track of. Now you have slots that you have to check, and each one has to correspond to a specific spell. In older editions of D&D, I'm talking 3rd edition and before, when a spellcaster prepared spells, they would actually put spells into slots that they had. So like nowadays, if you have 4 1st level slots and you have shield, cure wounds, and magic missile, you and you have those 3 spells prepared, you theoretically could cast magic missiles twice, shield once, cure wounds once, and that would work fine. You could also cast magic missile 4 times or shield 4 times, or any mixture, because you have spells prepared and then you have slots. Whenever you use a slot, you just do it. In older editions, when you prepared your spells at the beginning of the day, you actually had to put a spell into each slot. So if you had 4 1st level slots, you would have to prepare 1 slot of shield, 1 slot of cure wounds, 1 slot of magic missile, and then another slot of magic missile. And that meant if you used your cure wounds slot and you got to a point where you really need another cure wounds, you were SOL. Because you would use the 1 cure wounds you actually had prepared. Basically, in earlier editions, spells were more like prepared items than they were magic that you controlled. You would kind of prep these little items and then you could use them. And once they were used, you had to wait until the next day to prep a new package, a new poultice kind of thing. The only class that could get around that, at least in 3rd edition, I think it was the same in 2nd edition, was the Bard. And I think the Sorcerer could cast that way as well. And they eventually started adding more things, like I think warlocks and certain like hexblades and things like that in 3rd edition could instinct cast, kind of like bards or sorcerers. But that was one of the benefits of playing a sorcerer, was the fact that sorcerers got less spell slots, but they didn't have to have their spell items. They could simply have spells they know, slots they had, and cast what they wanted. So that is effectively what this is bringing back, is the spell items idea. But because that's not, again, they're bringing back part of an idea and they're trying to make it work in a new system which was designed specifically against that idea. The ability to level up spells and cast them at higher levels, again, is something that existed in earlier editions. In earlier editions, specifically in the 3rd edition, you did have meta magic, just like the sorcerer can use, but meta magic was feats. It wasn't meta magic was feats. It wasn't something that was built into this. This is sorcerer specifically. And again, the way you did that was you prepared a spell slot, like you would prepare a magic missile, but you would prepare it in the 4th level, and it would require, like, it was massively complicated, if I remember correctly, because it required you to sacrifice another spell, or it was weird, because casting a meta magic spell would require you to cast it at a higher spell slot. So it was the same effect, but whatever, it was the same power level, I guess, as a lower level slot, but putting a meta magic effect on it meant that you had to cast it using a higher level spell slot. So when you prepared it, you'd have to prepare it as a subtle magic missile, would be like a level 3 spell instead of a level 1 spell. It did the same damage, but it was subtle, so it couldn't be countered or something. I didn't do a ton of meta magic stuff in the 3rd edition, just because it was much more complicated than I ever wanted to get into. But that's kind of what we're dealing with here, only the issue is this system doesn't work that way, and so now you're trying to fuse two systems together and it's not working. Again, complexity for complexity's sake. You now have bomb slots that you can now... Bomb slots are now a new resource that they've just created. Before, we just had... it has a limited number of uses. That's something that already exists. Now, bomb slots are a new resource that you just created, because you can burn bomb slots to create higher level bombs, and then as soon as you use the bomb slot comes back. But then that doesn't really matter, because the only time you can fill those bomb slots is on a long rest. So the fact that the bomb slots come back when you use it and not when you get a long rest doesn't matter. It's just, again, another thing that you can track that doesn't affect the ability at all. It is complexity for complexity's sake. Now, that being said, let's talk about the bombs themselves. One thing that would make, in my mind, the idea of bomb slots, or not bomb slots, but especially bombs being cool, is if they did something other than damage. You already have damaging bombs. You don't need things that go, well, this is another kind of damage. There's no reason for that. And it's just, again, complexity for complexity's sake. So having Sleep and Thunderwave be your 3rd level specialty bombs, I'm actually not 100% against that. The idea of Sleep, again, Sleep is a mostly useless spell by the 3rd level, but it is a unique thing that you can't do any other way. So, okay. And Thunderwave, the movement aspect of Thunderwave is interesting. I would almost rather see them get rid of Thunderwave itself and just have this to be a Soundwave bombers. This is something like that, where really all it does is it pushes them back. Because again, they already have, at 3rd level, they already have bombs that they can use that can do damage. Thunderwave will do a little bit more damage, not by much, and it does it in a different shape. Okay, that is kind of interesting, but not that much. Not to require two new systems to be able to track it under. So the Thunderwave, I like the idea of just having something that allows you to move the enemy. That I think is cool. I think that would be really, really cool. You get to 6th level, you get Pyrotechnics. No fire required. Pyrotechnics is a weird spell. It basically allows you to take a flame that already exists and do one of two things. You can do fireworks, which effectively causes the area to be blinded, any creature in the area to make a save against being blinded, or smoke. It's a smoke screen. The huge limiting factor of Pyrotechnics is it requires a non-magical flame already there. So Pyrotechnics, because of that limitation, is useful in very specific situations. But for the most part, I've never seen anyone, even fire-based casters. Like I have people in some of my campaigns who play exclusively fire-based spellcasters, where they do everything. Fire is the answer to everything. You know how I used to say that? I don't know if I say that here much. Fire is the answer to everything, though. I get that from my D&D games because I have one of my players actually has played 2 different characters that have a thing for fire. And almost exclusively cast fire-based spells. They've even, if I remember correctly, they even took a feat or something that allowed them to change their damage type to fire. So even with those characters, I've never seen Pyrotechnics used because of that limitation of it requires fire to already be there, and it can't be magical fire. This takes away the fire required, and in that aspect, I actually think it's kind of cool. You either have a flashbang effectively, which blinds them, or a smokescreen, which also blinds them, but in a completely different way. Yeah, I don't really have a problem with that. Web is the other spell, and again, it does something that you can't do normally, and it's not just I do more damage. No, it's a status effect. I like that. I think it's cool. When we get up to 11th level, you get Shatter. Now, I've already mentioned that the bombs get more powerful as you go higher. At 11th level, they do 3d8 damage in a 10-foot sphere. Because again, I believe that by 5-foot sphere, they actually mean a 5-foot radius sphere. So a 10-foot sphere. Shatter. Each creature in a 10-foot radius sphere, so 20-foot sphere, so slightly larger, must make a con save. Creature takes 3d8 thunder damage. You do the exact same damage as your regular bomb, but it's a special bomb. That's the only difference. That, and I believe Shatter can actually do creatures made of inorganic materials such as stone, crystal, or metal have disadvantage on the saving throw. That is the only difference, and it's a con save versus a dex save. That's all that changes. And the other funny thing is at 11th level, there's another ability that we'll get to in a second that actually increases the radius, that's where it mentions it's a radius, from 5 feet to 15 feet. So Shatter, one of your 11th level specialty bombs, is worse than your regular bomb. There's no reason to ever use Shatter other than use its slot, if that is what a bomb slot is, to power up other things. It is literally Shatter only exists to be a fuel for other spells. And then Stinking Cloud. Stinking Cloud is another one that I actually like. I think it's a cool ability that doesn't get enough use at all. I don't think I've ever seen anyone use Stinking Cloud at any of my games, and it upsets me because it's a cool spell. And then 17th level is Wall of Fire. I actually went through because I'm like, I think Wall of Fire is a little bit too powerful. Everything else here is like a second level spell tops. I think even Stinking Cloud, I've got it right here. Stinking Cloud is a 3rd level ability. And even that is just borderline being a little too powerful. Wall of Fire is a 4th level ability. And even though you don't get it until 17th level, I just think it's a little bit too powerful. However, I went through and was like, well, maybe we'll just replace it with another wall spell. There aren't any other wall spells that make sense. Like, Wall of Fire makes sense. I just think it's a little bit too potent to be used. Now, the other issue with this, again, I'm going to harp on wording, is these bombed act as though you cast that spell. Cast that spell. That means all the rules for spell casting exist. Now, it doesn't mention in here that you're not required to concentrate on them. It does say the bomb effect lacks the maximum time the spell allows for concentration spells. However, because it said cast that spell, it still acts as you casting it, which requires concentration for most of these spells. They would need to specifically mention, hey, you don't have to concentrate on it for order for that to not work. This just means that it always has to remain going. Another thing that happens is removing the concentration aspect of it makes these spells significantly more dangerous. Like, the reason I have such an issue with Firewall is Firewall goes away if you lose concentration. There's tons of different ways to have that. I gotta look at the spells. I think Web and Stinking Cloud, I know. Stinking Cloud, the same thing, is they go away if you lose concentration. If you take away concentration, you take away the major limiting factor of the spells. And again, it's just... So not only do you have to keep track of the number of bombs, regular bombs you have specialty bombs. You can only make one a day, but if you don't use that bomb, the next day you can make another one, because while you can only make one a day, you can have one of every single bomb. So that not only means you have something that you track daily, you have something that you now track across multiple days. Also, you can cast some spells, one of which doesn't actually do anything, the rest of which are kind of interesting, but they all fall into the trap that you are casting spells, and so they can be countered. They can be removed with something like a Beholder's Anti-Magic Cone, or anything that causes anti-magic. That because they are spell effects, they can be dispelled. All of this doesn't make sense from a lore aspect of these bombs. They're supposed to be replicating the spells. But again, this is a really, really common thing to do when people design classes. They just go, oh, we'll let them cast a spell. We'll let them cast a spell, and then we don't have to actually design a new system. We can just let the system already there, which can work in certain situations. In this one, it doesn't. There are so many limitations to spell casting that don't make sense for the Grenadier to have. What would be much better is take the effects, call them something else, and they're no longer spells. We don't have to worry about concentration anymore. We can actually fine-tune it a little bit, because now these are unique abilities. So the fact that concentration is taken out, well, maybe then they don't last as long, because you can't end it early with concentration. I'm going to tell you guys right now, concentration never lasts the full duration. Or rather, very, very rarely lasts the full duration in actual combat. As soon as you start concentrating on a spell, enemies will start targeting you. Always, 100% of the time. It's how it's going to work. So generally, I think, for me playing, I've only had a concentration spell last... its full duration once. And that was, I was playing a Blade Singer that used Blur. And the reason it lasted that long is the rest of my party was fighting... was dealing with the rest of the baddies, and they were just rolling really poorly. So no one was hitting over there. And I was in the front fighting the big baddie of this particular adventure and one of his really powerful lackeys, and they never hit me, and I can't roll worth shit. So none of us hit anything, and being a Blade Singer gives you a bunch of benefits. I was Blade Singing at the time. So I had, not only did I have a really high AC, Blur meant that all of their attack rolls against me had disadvantage. And because I was Blade Singing at the time, I get to add my intelligence modifier to my concentration checks. So I think the few times they actually hit me, I made my concentration check. Because at that point, the thing I was, because it's a con save, I think I was adding like +7 or +8 to it because it was intelligence plus my constitution score. And I only needed to get a 10 or higher to make it. So literally all but a 1, 2, or a 3 would cause me to keep it. Yeah, it was. I think that's an 85% chance of keeping it, and they only hit me like 3 times. And so what happened is combat went on for 12 rounds or something like that. My blur wore off. So did my blade singing. So I had to re-blade sing and re-blur. And that was all it was. That is the only time, me personally, I've ever had a concentration spell cast in combat actually last the entirety of the concentration. Every other one, either combat ends before concentration ends, or concentration breaks. And if it's something that's doing damage, concentration always breaks. Always, 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 always. So, yes, the idea of having spells that are supposed to be limited by concentration not have that, you really need to redesign the things. And the easiest way to do that, it takes up more space on the page, but list them as different bombs, give them different names. It would be much, much cooler, much, much more interesting, and it allows you to keep it from becoming really, really powerful. So that is Explosive Innovator. Like I said, this is the definition of complexity for complexity's sake. They've added a new resource that is not even defined in here, just so that they could add more complexity and latch on to a more complex system. None of it needs to be there. There are much better ways to do this. Right off the bat, I would say get rid of the cost and also get rid of the keep a number of bombs equal to your intelligence modifier thing. Just say, hey, as an action, you can throw a bomb. It doesn't require preparation or anything like that. You can throw a bomb. It does this thing, and then you can use this ability a number of times equal to your intelligence modifier. Don't worry about you prepare the bomb and then this and then you have to keep track because the components are very expensive and then you don't need any of that. Treat it like any other limited ability. You'd be able to get rid of half of this paragraph of text, or no, not even paragraph, half of this page of text, and turn it into something that actually makes sense. However, that's not my official critique of this thing. I'll get to the actual suggestions for this class when I do final thoughts, because, yeah, there's a subclass I mean. Anyway, that's Explosive Innovator. Also at third level, third level you get a lot of different things. Also at third level, you get Planned Detonation. As a bonus action, you may select a number of creatures equal to your intelligence modifier who are unaffected by the effects of a bomb you use during the same turn. So now you have a bonus action ability that makes it so you can throw a bomb without hurting your allies. It's effectively a worse version of Sculpt spells from the Evocation Wizard. Again, I'm not a huge fan of taking aspects from other subclasses and giving them to an unrelated subclass, especially when, in order to do that, you have to handicap it in some way. It's just, it doesn't really work. This wasn't designed to work with this. Sculpt spells is meant to work with the spells that already exist. And this creates unintended consequences. Things like, it says bombs. It just says bombs. It doesn't actually define whether it means regular bombs or special bombs. So theoretically, with Planned Detonation, could you cast Stinking Cloud and none of your allies are affected for that turn? But then on the next turn, does that mean that they are affected by it at that point? Or are they always just never affected by it? None of this stuff is defined because, again, it's taking something from another class and shoehorning it into something where it doesn't need to be. Do I think it's kind of interesting? That you can bend your bomb explosions around your allies? Not really, no. It makes sense for the wizard because it's literally called Sculpt Spell. You are literally, as you cast the spell, you are sculpting it because you control magic. These are just explosions. Are you telling me when you built the bomb, you built effectively a shaped charge? Which if you don't know what a shaped charge is. A shaped charge is a highly directional charge is designed for a very specific purpose, generally for like breaching a wall or something. Shaped charges can be incredibly useful because what happens is you will build the bomb in a way that the explosive force goes entirely in one direction. And that means you can use it to blow open doors or create doors where there aren't any. Law enforcement use them every so often. And by law enforcement, I mean like SWAT level law enforcement, not like regular cops or anything. And the military uses them for breaching and the things like that. So what you're telling me with planned detonation is you somehow built a shaped charge that is going to just exclude a 5-foot area from a 10-foot in diameter blast zone? How? And especially once you get into the 50-foot, I could totally see that. Okay, we've made it so that it explodes like everywhere outside this little corner. Okay, you created basically you have a little thing like this, and you have a bomb here, and all of them are shaped charges. So you have one little area that doesn't do it. But what happens if you bend it around? You can do it for up to your intelligence modifier. So at third level, it's probably 3. So that means you could create a bomb that avoids 3 of 4 squares that it could hit. That's not even that useful in 5th edition. Once you get up to 11th level and you get that thing where it's now a 15-foot radius, well, that makes sense, but that makes even less sense with how the bomb works. So yeah, overall, planned detonation, not a fan in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't make sense with the bombs. It creates other issues with the concentration of effects and the things like that. It's just, it is just a poor thing. And again, at third level, you have already introduced bombs that you have to keep track of the cost and how many of you've used every day, so that you know how many you need to build. Plus your specialty bombs, which you not only have to keep to track of which how many you've made, but which kind, because you have different ones that you can make, and you have to keep track of these bomb slots that aren't defined. And now you also have another third level of ability. You don't need it. If that was to say, I'd say shove it to 6th level, because at third level you have enough new things. You're going to overwhelm the player at third level with all the new stuff that they have to keep track of now. So that's planned detonation. At 6th level, you get proximity detonation. You can set your bomb to go off when any creature wanders within 5 feet of the bomb. This sounds more useful than I think it would be. Proximity bombs are super useful in stealth games. They're remarkably useful, because what you do is you put the proximity over here, and then you go somewhere else, and then they walk into it, boom, and everyone runs over there, and you go over here, and it's super useful. D&D is not a stealth video game. Are there situations where a proximity detonation could be pretty interesting, like a proximity stinking cloud or something? Yes, there could be. It's going to be almost exclusively out of combat. In combat, you're almost never going to use proximity detonation unless your enemies understand what it is. And let me explain what I mean by that. So, if your enemies don't understand that if they walk within 5 feet of the bomb, it's going to explode, then just leaving it on the ground is not going to change their behavior patterns whatsoever. And delaying the blast of the bomb is not really going to do a ton. Unless it's prep work, it's not going to be used. However, if your enemies know that walking within 5 feet of this object is going to cause it to explode, that has just created a 5-foot no-go zone. That could actually be useful, but it would rely on the enemies being aware of it. And the enemies being intelligent. Any creature, any like monster kind of creature is not going to have the intelligence to know, oh, I need to stay 5 feet away from that object. Until it actually gets exploded in its face. Like it's going to have to actually observe that this thing explodes when you get within 5 feet of it, and learn from that. If you have intelligent creatures, which happens a fair amount in D&D, saying, hey, I'm putting my proximity bomb right over there. Nobody go within 5 feet of it. Then they might actually avoid that area, and you can use it to bottleneck and things like that. Or they may make the choice to send an expendable into it to explode so they can rush through. Either way, that does create something that's kind of interesting, but it is a very limited experience for that to actually be useful. And again, I don't see regular bombs. I don't see doing enough damage that it would inspire enemies to avoid that area. And for the specialty bombs, again, they could only be used once. Every bomb can only be used once. So they're never going to be able to learn, oh, that's a stinking cloud bomb. That's not something they could ever know, because it's a custom creation of your own. It's not like you're going to sit there and when it goes out, a huge sign goes out. This bomb is going to cast stinking smell. The other issue that happens is if it is going to cast a spell, could Dispel Magic be cast on it to get rid of the spell? Because you've effectively prepared a spell to be cast. Or when someone gets within 5 feet of it, can you counterspell it there? Because you are casting a spell. That is how it is phrased. So it creates more problems than it solves. And again, for a 6th level ability, this is where I say, if you were to keep planned detonation, just shove it together with proximity detonation and just call it detonation control. It would work better that way. But again, I have different suggestions. Going to 11th level, you get Plentiful and Potent. Thank you, phone. You double the number of bombs you can create during a long rest and can carry. Additionally, you may hold 2 of each specialty bomb. Additionally, your basic bombs can be detonated with a range of up to 15 radius. Okay, so I already talked about the 15-foot radius. Now, Shatter is completely worthless. Now, each one of your specialty bombs, you can have 2 of each instead of 1. You still only make 1 per long rest, because that hasn't changed. So now you just have more bomb slots. So you have a larger number of this limited resource that hasn't really been defined, and you can use things. The whole thing is just, let's add more complexity. The ability is already getting more powerful, and as you get to higher levels as the Machinist, you already have more things that you can do and more choices you can make. You don't need to be able to make the same choice you've been able to make more times. Like, I just don't see, like, I could almost see this being your basic bombs recharge on a short rest instead of a long. That would make more sense than you double the number of bombs you can carry. That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. So yeah, overall, again, it adds more stuff that you're not going to need to use, and more complexity for no real benefit other than, hey, you can do this more. What Plentiful and Potent probably I'm gonna try this one more time. What Plentiful and Potent probably means is probably just turns into you are never running out of bombs, because you just never use it enough. Not that it becomes an unlimited resource, it's just you never use it enough to ever actually run out. Because at this point, you can carry 10 basic bombs per day, plus at 11th level 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, plus 12 specialty bombs. So you have a grand total of 22 actions. Again, the average combat lasts anywhere between like 5 to 6 things. So we're talking about 4 combats per day where you do nothing but throw bombs. You're just never going to run out. So yeah, this is a quote-unquote limited resource becoming unlimited simply because you have so many other things you can do. You're never going to run out of these things. Finally, At 17th level, you have Bomb Launcher. You double the range for your bombs. Additionally, damaging effects of your bombs deal additional damage equal to your intelligence modifier. Now, I don't know if I've just forgotten, which is very, very possible. Throw a bomb within 30 feet. Oh, yeah. So now it's 60 feet, which isn't that big a change. I mean, it's double the range. That's useful. But yeah, I mean, with the fact that you're already using a gun and you're already a little bit more hypermobile than normal because you're a little bit faster with that what was it called again? Peloton. I don't see the additional range really being that much of a benefit for you, other than things like Stinking Cloud. Stinking Cloud is a 20-foot radius sphere, so it allows you to be a little bit further away from the edge of the Stinking Cloud when you do it. So additional damage equal to your intelligence modifier is negligible. This is 17th level. At 17th level, your bombs are doing 48 damage base, I think. Yeah, 48 damage, and now they'll do 48 damage plus 5. 5 additional hit points, especially since you can only throw one bomb per turn because it takes your action to do that, and you can't use extra attack on it or anything. Means that adding your intelligence modifier does literally nothing. For a 17th level ability, it is massively underpowered. It doesn't feel really cool. You don't feel really, really awesome when you go, yes, I'm now a 17th level Grenadier. I can throw things a little farther. The visual of it's kind of cool. You can now launch bombs, but the actual practical use of it, there's just nothing to it. So, final thoughts. Overall, the Grenadier just isn't great. It doesn't really interact with any of the defining features of the class. Explosive Innovator is far too complicated for the really limited benefit it gives you. Specialty bombs have some promise to them, but the way that they are enacted is needlessly complicated and can be countered really, really easy, which getting your spell counterspelled as a spellcaster is not fun. But you have tons of spells that you can continue to cast. That's how spellcasters work. Or you have other things you can do instead of just a spell casting. This, you have a limited number of these spells and a single spellcaster, and you just go, okay, your one use of that, which will take you a day to get back if you want that particular bomb back, is gone. Just doesn't feel good. The rest of it is just... It doesn't feel good at all. And kind of the biggest issue I have with this is there is no Grenadier in Final Fantasy XIV at all. The Machinist doesn't really throw bombs. They use their gun, and they use inventions or tools, and that's it. They don't throw bombs ever. And so not only does this not, like, again, the entire purpose of the compendium here is to effectively allow you to play your Final Fantasy XIV character on the table. And the Grenadier doesn't let you do that in any way, shape, or form. Nothing about this feels like the Final Fantasy XIV version of this character. That being said, my suggestion on how to deal with this is to get rid of Grenadier completely. Get rid of the name, get rid of everything like that. I'm not saying don't have a third subclass. I'm saying the bomb-focused Machinist I don't think is a good fit for this. What I do think would be a good fit would be a subclass called the Inventor. And the reason behind that is... one of the things that makes playing Machinist so much fun is their tools. And a lot of those tools haven't shown up in this subclass. The auto crossbow, the drill, the bioblaster, and the flamethrower are all really, really fun to use in Final Fantasy 14. The drill is really cool because what happens is you pull out this massive, like, two-handed, almost Gatling gun looking thing, but instead of, 3 or 4 barrels spinning, it has this giant drill head in the front. So you go boom, and you go boo, and it fires off this drill, and then the drill hits the enemy, and then you watch this massive drill just sit there going. It is super fun. It is really, really satisfying. When you get drill, it is so much fun to use. Auto crossbow looks cool. It's kind of similar. You pull out this massive crossbow and you go... and it's built around the heat mechanics, so you literally get to spam auto crossbow. You have to go... You can do it about 5 times before your heat gauge runs out. It's really fun. It's an area attack. The flamethrower, literally you just stand there going for like 10 seconds. It's all you do. You can't move when you do it. That's the only thing I don't like about flamethrower is you can't move while you're doing it. So you have to really place yourself well, because if an AoE happens while you're doing it, you have to move and it cancels it, and then you waste the rest of the time. But for 10 minutes, you're just like... And it's super cool. Bioblaster looks kind of similar, but you sit there and you just spray this goo on stuff. It's only a single action, and it shares a cooldown timer with a drill. So basically, Bioblaster is the area version of drill in Final Fantasy XIV. All of them are really, really cool. None of them show up in this, and they could have. The inventions that I talk about, the technologist thing. That technically is what the Grenadier is connected to the base class in, is through the tech attack stuff. However, why create a brand new system when there's already something in the lore that would make a lot of sense, especially if you go back all the way to Final Fantasy VI for all of your inspiration. My idea would be to have something similar to like the Rune Knight does it, the Elemental Monk, where basically at 3rd level you're given a choice of a bunch of different tools, and you get a limited number. Because there's not that many tools that exist, I would say you would probably get 1 tool at 3rd level, 1 tool at 6th level, 1 tool at 11th level, 1 tool at 18th or 17th level. So you have a maximum of 4 tools that you get access to, and they could all be based on tools that don't exist. You have the auto crossbow, the drill, the bioblaster, the flamethrower, and then from Final Fantasy VI, you also have the noise blaster, the flash, the chainsaw, and the debilitator. All of those could turn into really interesting things. And I've mentioned before, when you have that kind of laundry list thing, you want to have more, generally at least double the number of choices, the number of options than you have choices. Because otherwise, if you eventually get all of them, what it turns into is the higher the level you get, the worse thing that you pick from. And there's ways around that by like limiting them by level and stuff like that. Like that's how they do it with the Elemental Monk. But the Elemental Monk is not designed particularly well and massively needs a redesign to actually be fun to play. But that's what I see the Inventor could be. Is you have access to these tools. None of the tools should be about doing damage. Your base Machinist class does that. So give the tools something different. Again, Bioblaster could add the poisoned condition, or could add a damage over to time. Flamethrower, again. Noise Blaster actually confused creatures in Final Fantasy VI. Going off of that, there could be a charm effect built to the Noise Blaster. Flash, obviously, you could use to blind. Chainsaw, pick something interesting with Chainsaw. In Final Fantasy VI, Chainsaw ignored defense and stuff like that. Like, it was just this thing where you put a chainsaw like suit on, actually, if you actually watch the sprite work. He'd actually put like a chainsaw suit on, and he would just go forward and go and hit him with a chainsaw. And then Debilitator actually made them weak to a random damage to type. Obviously, the random aspect wouldn't be very much fun, but having something that allows you to make them weak or vulnerable to a specific type of damage, even if it only lasted for a turn or something, could be really, really cool. So yeah, the entire focus of the tools would be on control aspects. Make this the control based thing, because you have Marksman, which allows you to really get a little bit more off of get a little bit more out of your gray shots. It's really focused on your gray shot. Tinkerer, you have your pet that you get to do cool stuff with, and then Inventor could be a control based subclass where you just get to do cool stuff and control the battlefield, and it would be really, really fun. With everything going on in my life, I do not have time to redesign this as a subclass. And going forward with the other the three classes I'm going to be covering, I won't be making any suggestions for complete reworks of any of the classes or subclasses, just because I am so burnt out from redesigning so many of these classes and doing this for so long that I simply can't. I am burnt out creatively. But I don't like saying, hey, this doesn't work, without having something to say of, well, what if you tried this? And like I said, I think if you change Grenadier into Inventor, I think it would be much more fun. Again, take some create some stuff and take some inspiration from Final Fantasy VI, specifically Edgar, because there's a lot of cool stuff, and bring in some of the tools that exist in Final Fantasy XIV that don't exist in this subclass yet, because they're really fun. They're really iconic parts of the Machinist and the history of the Machinist. Again, in Final Fantasy VI, Edgar almost exclusively used, once you got the auto crossbow, it was better than any weapon you ever gave him, and that was one of the first things you got. And then Bioblaster was massively useful, Flamethrower was super useful, Chainsaw was, like, all of them were much more useful than any weapon you ever equipped him with. So the entirety of using Edgar in Final Fantasy VI was using tools. You never used his attack action unless you were grinding or something. So yeah, but bring that stuff back. I think that would be really cool. Otherwise, this has been a really long one again. Sorry about that. That is going to be all for me today. As always, if you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, turn notifications on in the comments down below. Let me know what you think about the idea of Inventor instead of the Grenadier. And let me know what the next class you guys want me to cover is. Put that in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is all for me. And I will see you guys next time. I may even see you in Endwalker, because early access starts in like a day and a half here. So, see you guys. Bye-bye.